Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. So now we're going to actually start Always On Group and give you a demonstration of how to do it. So a couple of things you'll notice here that I've got an extra database called Rep4. And previously when I gave you this script, I noted that Rep2 had its database recovery set to full when it should have been simple. So that's a simple thing to do. You can either change this to full and execute it, or you can go right click to Rep2 and go to properties, go to options, and change it from full to simple. It should be simple. This is what I wanted to do, but I think I accidentally did full. So that's one thing. The other thing you'll notice is since the last video, I created another database called Rep4. So you can go right click, new database, and call it Rep4 and go OK. Or you can actually, execute this script that I'm going to provide for you also right here, which will create a database and it'll set to recovery full. So now that we have four separate databases with different configurations, we're ready to look at how to set up Always On HA. So the way to do that, obviously, I've got two servers running. Make sure your DC is running always, server 1 and server 2. One thing you'll notice on server 2 is if I expand that and refresh the databases, you'll see I don't have any rep databases here. And if I go to Always On, there's nothing on Always Set up here. So I'm going to go to my primary server, and the whole idea is to replicate the selected databases as a group. That's the key thing, as a group. Rather than doing it individually one by one, I'm going to select a couple of them that are synchronized, or not synchronized, but configured, and then we'll select those and we'll migrate them to server 2. So let's see how we do that. So the first thing I want to do is go to Always On Available Group right here and right click it. Go to New Available AG Group and the wizard will pop up. Now this wizard is basically setting us up to saying that we're going to be creating a new AG group, and we're going to go through these validations and creating databases and endpoints and so on. And we're just going to say next to that, but you can certainly read this and go next. It's going to ask for a AG group. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it 1, 2, 3 only because I have scripts that are relevant to this. So I'm going to go next. Now here is the important thing I want you to note. This is the reason I created 4 Rep1, Rep2, Rep3, Rep4 databases with different configurations. Because when you do creating a new AG group, it's going to look at the various databases there, and it has to meet certain requirements. There are a couple of requirements that must be met is that it should be in full recovery mode. And as you know, Rep2 is in simple mode. And the other thing is that you must have a full database backup of each database that you're about to create in the AG group. And as you can see, if they don't meet the requirements, it'll tell you why. Now, obviously, from the Rep1, Rep2, Rep3, 4, you can see only 2 are highlighted, Rep1 and Rep4, whereas Rep2 and Rep3 are not highlighted. I can't even select them if I wanted to. And you can see the reason here. Obviously, Rep1, since we're going to migrate that of the 4, it says meets prerequisite. That's great. Here you'll see, even though I took a full database backup of Rep2, it's not in the full recovery mode, which it should be. So we can't select that. Rep3, even though it's in full recovery mode, we didn't take a backup of it, so we can't select that. So none of these 2 are met. Rep4 we are met. So of the selections that we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, only we can migrate 2 databases to the secondary replica. So I'll go next. Now here you'll notice obviously the available replicas, and obviously we start with the primary replica, which is this here, and we're going to select the appropriate databases to migrate to the secondary database. The first thing we'll notice here is, let me just expand this so you can read it better. Here, obviously, as I said, the server instance is 1. Its initial role is primary. And you can have up to 3 automatic failovers. And they can be either in synchronous mode or asynchronous mode. We're going to actually select synchronous mode, and this pops up automatically. Now, obviously, the whole idea is we want to add another replica. So click Add Replica, and we have to connect to it. So I'm going to connect to server 2. And obviously we can have this asynchronous, meaning if I don't check this, or synchronous. I'm going to actually have both becoming synchronous. The other option you'll look at is read secondary. Now, obviously, we want the secondary to be readable only. It's not writable, but readable, meaning anything that happens on server 1, we can do a select statement against. So we can't modify it, we can't delete it, or we can't update it, but we can do select statement. And that's great for reporting or backups. So I'm going to go yes for our instance here. So now that we've set up here, let's go to endpoints. Here you'll notice that we talked about very similar technology that is built upon database mirroring, and you'll recognize now the endpoints that's using the same technology as database mirroring. Make sure you have the appropriate service account set up. If this is not a domain user with the appropriate rights, then you will not be able to do it. So now let's look at the backup preference. Where should the backups occur? Prefer secondary. Automatic backups for this available group should occur on the secondary replica. So we're just going to leave it there. If you can you can choose secondary only, primary replicas, or any replica that you wish. And then obviously it has what's called a backup priority, where it'll allow you to back up database either on server 1 or server 2, where it'll be highest to lowest in terms of backing up the thing. Since we're choosing secondary and we're going to leave it as preference, we don't really care about that. Last thing is, here's a listener. Specify the preference of the AG listener that will provide the client connection point. And remember what I said that the listener was. So listener has a dedicated IP address. And what it does basically, it's somewhat comparable to a witness in that it's going to be looking for server 1 and server 2. And anytime there's a failover between those two replicas, it will automatically direct the clients to the one that is the primary database and that's live. So that's what its primary purpose is. So you can create this later, or we can create it now, and I'm going to create it now. So I'm going to select this chain. You can call it, and obviously it's going to be called a DNS name. So we have to reserve this name. I'm just going to call it RA, just for the heck of it. And the port that I'm going to use is the default 1433, which is SQL port. And I'm going to provide a static IP address. And remember, this next sequential address, 192.168.0. is 55, I believe. So I'm going to go OK. And now that everything is set up, we're going to go next. And here, obviously, we've mentioned this before, select the database synchronization preference. Obviously, in order for synchronous mode, you have to have a full database backup and the transactional log backup of each selected databases. Since rep 1 and rep 4 have been backed up and they're synchronized, we can just leave it as this, and this is the path that needs to be shared. So we can go next. And let's begin. And now obviously there it is. So now it's going to start looking at creating the AG group. And as you can see, it goes through these various checkpoints, which we obviously want green. So go next. And now obviously it's going to verify the choices that we've made. Basically, it's just saying I'm going to set up the AG group for server 1. I'm going to take the various databases on one, and I'm going to replicate them to server 2 that are secondary replica. So let's go finish. And let's look at that process now. And that will just take a few minutes. We'll look at more details. And again, you can go through this process yourself, what it's doing, so you get a better understanding of how the AGs are created. So in a nutshell, basically what we're doing is we're taking databases as a group from server 1 and replicating them to server 2. Once they become active on server 2, they become live in the sense that they're read-only. So we can actually write reports against this server 2 rather than server 1. So that's the great benefit of that. So let's go close. Everything looks fine. And now you can see that the AG group has been created on server 1. If I click on this and refresh, you'll see now the databases that we selected has a title of synchronized, which we need. If we expand this and expand these various plus signs, you can get a little more information about the AG group. The AG group is 1, 2, 3. It's on the primary, which is server 1. Obviously, the server 1 is the primary, and the server 2 is called the secondary. And these are the databases that are involved in this replication. Here is the AG listener group, listener, RA. So that's created. If I go to server 2 now, and if I refresh the databases, you'll see that I do have those two rep1 and rep4 databases synchronized. And that's the whole point. And they're read-only, meaning we can actually read databases here, or data that is being sent over from server 1. And we'll demonstrate in a second. So now the great benefit of this is I can, as data is being synchronized from server 1 to server 2, I can actually set up backup jobs here rather than on my primary server to offload the work. And it'll be great. So let's actually do a couple of things. And let's see what happens. If I go rep 1 and expand the tables, you'll see I don't have any tables called table 1. So what I'm going to do is right click, new table. And I'm just going to go X. And I'm going to just save it. So basically this says, again, as you know, emulating data. So I'm going to go close and refresh the tables. And now I've got a table created, table 1 on database 1. On server 1. Let's see if it automatically synchronized as it should on server 2. So if I go to server 2, expand this or just refresh it, I should have table 1. And that's wonderful. We can actually read this data right now. We can't edit it here, but we can read it. So go back to server 2. Let's just make sure that rep 4 can do that, since the whole idea is to group and migrate them in groups. Go to here. Expand this. I don't have any database tables called table 1. So let's create a table called table 1 on rep 4. So let's save that. And now if I refresh it on rep 4, I've got a table called table 1. Let's go to server 2 and let's look at that. And there we go. So it's synchronizing. So that's great. But remember what we said, server 2 is read-only, meaning we can actually write reports against it. So let's go over here and look at the design, look at edit. I don't have any data in there, so I'm just going to put an X in there, another X here, another X here, another X here, and so on. So now I've got, let's run it. So now I've got 4X or 3 X's here. Let's close this. And now if I go to server 2, where did I have it on? I had it on rep 4. So let's go on rep 4 and expand the table. And now if I do a select statement against it, I should see those 4 X's, which I do. So as you can see, this is incredibly great because it's not being obsolete as in log shipping or as in database mirroring. We can actually read the data that's being provided for server 1. And actually I can, since it's being synchronized automatically, I can set up jobs now here to back up data 4 in database rep 1 and leave the workload on server 1 alone. So that's the great benefit. So now that's happened, let's do a little failover. So right now you'll notice here, if I expand this, you'll notice that the primary replica is server 1 and the secondary is server 2. And the way to do that is if you right-click availability replicas, or actually availability group, go to show dashboard. This is a great GUI interface that allows you to see the status of your AG groups. If I click on this, you can see the availability group state healthy. Primary instance is server 1. Failover is automatic. Cluster state that we talked about. These are obviously the replicas associated with this AG group. Talking about their role, the status, whether it's synchronized or not. And since we have it synchronized mode, obviously we're going to see synchronized mode. And here you can see the status of all the databases on server 1 and server 2. No data loss. Let's start a failover actually. So I'm on server 1 and this is primary. So I'm just going to go start. And basically what I'm saying is I want server 1 to switch roles with server 2. I want server 2 to become primary and server 1 to become secondary, because now we may have to do some kind of activities. So let's connect to server 2. And there we go, and go next. And as you can see, currently primary replica is 1, new replica is 2. Failover, no data loss. Go finish. Let's look at that. There's 4 processes here.